Good morning. Welcome to Grief Inspired Live. My name is Catherine McNulty, and I am happy to be with you here on this Valentine's Day. And if you can see, I wore my Valentine's Day shirt to honor the holiday, although I have to say it's not one of my favorites. But I think today is going to be a good one. So, welcome back to Grief Inspired Live. What I do here is to support you in the healing process. I have a special love in my heart for mothers who are suffering the loss of a baby of their own, the loss of a pregnancy, from miscarriage, mothers who have stillborn babies, and mothers who just, struggle to get pregnant altogether. I think that there is a space that needs to be held for people to be able to have conversations, not only about grief, but also specifically to mothers who are suffering. And that's why I do what I do. Now, to that end, I always obviously welcome anyone who's suffering from grief of any kind, because I think that the conversation needs to expand, that we aren't talking enough about grief in general in this society, in this world. And I really want to create a place where you can come, where you can talk, you can speak your mind, where you can just feel supported and feel like you're not alone in the process. So this is part 3 of a series I've been doing on Grief Inspired Live, because I think it's an important conversation to have. And if you missed any of the other ones, you can find them on my Grief Inspired YouTube channel. I'm posting them up there. So if you want to go back and watch any of the others, you're more than welcome to do that. This is part 3. Like I said, next week, we're going to have part 4. I decided to add on to it and do a little bit more to keep the conversation going. And so next week, what we're going to do is I'm going to have some conversations this week with some folks that who know grief very, very well, who have done things with their grief, who are really committed to healing and walking through their grief. And I want to share with some of you how they've taken the grief that they hold in their heart and really put it into action in a way that has meaning in their life. And we all do this differently. Some of us do, some of us don't, but I think that it's an important conversation to have. So I want to celebrate some of the folks that I know who I think have done a really good job moving through their grief. And I want to, share some of their thoughts with you as I speak with them, so that you can benefit from their experience. And who knows, maybe I will bring them all on with some more lives, and so you can get to meet all of them as well if they're comfortable to do that. So this 3-part series, 4-part series now, healing from grief. What are we doing? Well, what we're doing in this series is defining what healing from grief actually is, exploring what it means, and then really putting some actions into place to help you move forward. So in part 1, we talked about, what is healing from grief, right? So, I'm very focused on being goal-oriented in the rest of my life, but the challenge is, and throughout my grief process, I had to figure out, what do I even want? And to be honest, I'm still in that discovery phase. But once you know what it is that you want, you can put actions in place to move toward it. So when we talk about healing from grief, well, what does that mean for you? How do you want to feel about your specific loss? How do you want to look back on this time that you've spent grieving? And how do you want to look back on their life? This week is Valentine's week. Today happens to be Valentine's Day. Everyone's talking about love. And I want to remind you, before we move too much forward in this, that the reason why you're grieving is because of the amount of love that you have in your heart. And the more that you love the person that you're missing, the deeper your grief is going to be. And so I want you to remember that. I hope that it brings you a little bit of comfort to know that the amount of grief and the amount of pain that you're experiencing is exactly equivalent and equal to the amount of love that you had for that person. So we talked about what is healing. We talked about defining it. Last week, we talked also about the 7 stages of grief, the heavy emotions that come up, the things like depression, betrayal, guilt, resentment, all of those. So I encouraged you last week to explore some of that for yourself, to, really understand and know when you're stuck. And it's okay to be stuck, and it's okay to acknowledge all of your feelings. Sometimes we try to push them all down and act like they're not there. But we know that that doesn't work. And so it's acknowledging what the feelings are that you're experiencing, what emotions you have, what are the thoughts that are going off in your head, making note of them, becoming aware of them first. And once you know that, then you can put actions in place to help support you with that. So that's what we've done up until now, and what we want to talk about now is what are the steps, what are the things that you can do if you know how you want to feel and how you want your healing to be. How do we move you toward that? Good morning, Deb. So good to see you here. Yes, and it's the love we have for those that we have lost, right? And it may be things like Valentine's Day or the holidays really bring up, maybe it's one person, maybe it's multiple people, maybe you have different levels of grief for different people in your life, but it's all real, and it all needs to be dealt with and needs to be addressed. So I want to ask you, do you know what healing means for you? Do you have a goal? And if you don't, that's okay, right? The idea here is to explore it. And I think for me, just looking back on my experience, it was harder for me to define what I actually wanted. What I could define was what I knew I didn't want. And so I want to talk about that for a little bit, because I'm hoping that because you're here, and what I say, on my lives resonates with you, I'm making the assumption that this might be the same for you. And you can tell me either yes or no with that. But in terms of what I knew I didn't want, I knew that I didn't want my loss to be all consuming. I knew I didn't want my loss to end me. I knew that I didn't want to be miserable forever. I mean, I stayed miserable for a really long time. But I also got to the point where I didn't want to be miserable anymore. I just wanted to let it go. And I wanted to figure out how to do that. And I didn't want my loss to define me, right? Everyone knew that I was pregnant and I had lost the baby, and that freaks everybody out. And I didn't want to be like, hey, that's the one who lost the baby. I didn't, oh, so sad for her. I didn't want that to be sort of my story. I didn't want to feel broken. I didn't want to feel like there was something wrong with me. And I certainly didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to be a victim to my grief. I didn't want to, walk around with a tattoo on my forehead that said, well, I deserve to be miserable because this happened to me. And it was really, really important to me. But I didn't know how. It was important to me not to be a victim, to not be all consumed, to not feel broken. I wanted to heal. And I didn't know how to do it. So that sort of led me over time. And this was not an instantaneous process. This is like the soul searching, exploring that needs to go on, that happens for all of us who are grieving. But over time, I started to learn what I did want. I did want to make sense of it all. I wanted to understand how a God can take our children from us. I wanted to understand why this happened, why it happened to me, why we lose children at all. I wanted it to make sense in my world, not for anybody else, but just for me. And I wanted to come to terms with losing my son, but also being able to talk about it, being able to share who he was for other people, being able to talk about the time that I got to spend with him. And then later what started to evolve, and right from the get-go, because I lost my child, I had this like overwhelming urge, and I felt compelled to try to help other people. So I had stayed at the Ronald McDonald House while my son was in the hospital before he passed away. And all of the people who are at that, no matter what age their children are, their kids are in the hospital, and you spend the entire time like worrying, like, is my kid gonna live or die? And it's a day-to-day process, and you just don't know. And it ends well for some people, and some kids go home, and some people go home like we did without a child. And then, suffering the repercussions of all of that. So, but I felt like I understood that. I understood that space of pain and frustration and the uneasy feeling of not having any control over anything that was going on in her life. So I felt compelled to get into action. And the action that I took was I volunteered at the Ronald McDonald House so that I would run into these people and that I could just understand and be there for them to say, like, I get it. And I never told them that I had lost a child too, because they were still in the midst of their struggle. But I wanted them to know that there was somebody else who understood, and they never really thought about why I understood. And that didn't matter, right? It was about me supporting them. And so that was one of the ways that my grief compelled me into action. And I think it's something that also really helped me in the early days of my grieving process. So if there's anything like that happens for you, and you feel this compulsion, and it can be small, it can be anything, go ahead and acknowledge that and act on it. Like, don't just think about it and then push it aside. Like, do something about it. I think that would be my advice there. And again, like I was saying, it doesn't happen overnight. And I don't think, is there a finish line to grief? We were talking about this earlier. Can you say, I am 100% healed and I'm not grieving anymore? I don't know. I think you can get to a place where you feel good about how far you come. I think you can get to a place where you feel like you've processed a lot, that you're not stuck, that you can use what you've learned and the knowledge that you have to inform your future. I think it can also help you to be there for other people, right? Having a sense of empathy, because you have this sense of knowing, and knowing what it feels like oftentimes will make you feel more compassion for someone else than maybe before you went through it. I don't know if that's true for you. That certainly was true for me. I'm a far more compassionate. I mean, I've always been empathetic, but now I'm compassionate because I know the pain, and I want to make a difference, and I want to reach out. And sometimes maybe I reach out too much. But anyways, I'm not sure if there's a finish line to grief. But I think that, the whole premise to Grief Inspired and what I put together, goes around, what I call the 3 pillars. And it's the process is, understanding your grief and what that has happened to you, and how your grief relates to who you are as a person. And I honestly believe that the path to true healing in anything, whether it be grief or anything that may have happened to us, trauma, anything else, I think that the path to healing from all of that is finding out who you are at your core and being who you are at your core, and having this knowing who I am, so that you can become unwavering when people say things to you, when people do things to you, when people judge you, when people tell you that you're not good enough, when people tell you that they don't like you, when your friends betray you, when all of those things happen, having a knowing and knowing who you are at your core and being unwavering is the path to healing. And so I think that, and again, to that end, right? Knowing who you are at your core is not something that happens overnight. This is, it's a lifelong process. And I don't think it will ever end. Because for me, I am finding personally that the more I know who I am at my core and what I want and what I value and what I'm willing to accept and what I won't accept, the more I know that, the happier I'm getting, because I'm finding my place in the world and I'm being less receptive to what other people say, to what other people think I should do, or what I think I shouldn't do. And if things are going well for me, not to, we talk about in some of my other courses, like shrinking your light. Like, you are who you are. And most of us have more light within us than we let most people know, because we don't want to dim, we don't want other people to see what's going on with us. So I think that that's important. So my question for you is, have you come to an understanding of what healing from grief is for you? And do you feel like you're still on the journey? And then the question becomes, how do you continue to move forward in all of that? And so my questions for you would be, first, if we talk about early healing from grief, do you understand your emotions? Do you understand the thoughts that you have as it relates to your grief? If you don't, or if you think that there are still things that need to be worked through, that's why I do coaching. That's what I think coaching is for, is to be in the exploration. And sometimes, therapy can be good for that. I've done a lot of therapy in my life. Sometimes people don't like therapists because they think, if you're seeing a therapist, then that means you're mentally ill. And I don't think that's the case, because grief is not a mental illness. Grief is not a disease, as Earl Groman says. Grief is is the price we pay for love. And that's what Earl Groman says. But I think that the exploration has to happen, and whether you explore it, internally within, you explore it with a therapist, whether you explore it with a coach, I think that needs to happen. It absolutely needs to happen. And you can choose what makes you feel the most comfortable. If you hire a coach, the process will go faster for you. I can guarantee you that. That's why I coach people, is because I want to help them move through grief more quickly, to find their path to healing more quickly, and then get things, get to where you want to go. Not necessarily where anybody tells you where you think you should go, right? We can, everyone talks about, grief is your own. Your grief is your own, and it's not like anybody else's. And so don't forget that, right? But I want to give everyone who's here, who watches, I want you to have hope that you can move through healing through your grief. I think that you can find healing. I think there are things that you can do. So we mentioned coaching is a big one. Reading about grief, understanding more about the type of grief that you are experiencing. If you've lost an adult child, find articles. You can find everything on YouTube now. You don't even have to necessarily go. You can find groups with other people who have it, right? Just engage in the conversation. And you can let your grief come up as it comes up. It doesn't have to come all at once. If you want to join a group and then not participate for a while and then go back to it, you're more than welcome to do that. If you haven't joined No Mom Should Grieve Alone, which is my Facebook group, I want to encourage you to do that. So it's grief inspired, No Mom Should Grieve Alone. That is a private Facebook group. So if you want to be able to share freely without judgment, that's a place you can do that. And that's in a private group. It's less than a couple hundred people, which I think is very non-intimidating. And you can really share. And I can guarantee that if you share, it's gonna help someone else. What else can you do? Lots of books. I have tons of books here that I have read because I like taking pieces. So even like this is a good one. So this is a healing after loss. This is a daily meditation. Early in my grief, I certainly, and still to this day, I'm too antsy to like sit down and read a whole book, I think. But what I like to do is you can open it and you can find a passage and you can read it and you can think on it. And it will move you. It will move you forward. I can guarantee you that. And so it's just being in the exploration, I think, is something that's good. So I highly recommend those as well. I think that, we talk about Toolbox Tuesdays. Toolbox Tuesdays that I have are things that I give you to put you into action to encourage you to continue to heal, right? So we talk a lot about journaling. We talk about, talking into your phone and just creating like a video library for yourself of your journey so that you can see how you're progressing through the process, journaling and keeping a journal so that you can look back and say, wow, 6 months ago, I was in a really tough spot, and I feel like, hey, it's been 6 months and I've been continuing to grieve and I feel further along so that you feel like you're making progress. So whatever it is that you can do to help you push through the process. And Deb, yes, finding someone who can help you through your grief is the holy grail. Honestly, it really is. And it's nuts because the whole grief process wants to pull you in and it wants to make you isolate and it wants to make you like stay in your own little bubble and like wait for it to get over. But that can't happen if you're not talking about it. So yes, Deb, finding someone, it doesn't matter who it is, someone that you feel like can help you. And if you need a coach, that's what I do. I'm happy to help you. We want to push you. We want to push you forward. And so I want to encourage you to continue to fight the fight, continue to move forward through your grief, continue to look for things that heal you. Whether it be for me, like I've talked about my gardening and how much that heals me, and creating order, creating order in my world makes me feel so good. And I know that, right? So when I can organize a cabinet or a drawer or put things in just a line, and these are even like bookends that don't, on the other side, so now it's messing up, but bookends that like keep things standing straight, like over time without having to have a bookend standing up against it. Like those are the things that make me happy. And so it's because I can create order and I can find it and I like order. And so that's something that I do for myself, is now I'm putting order around the rest of my life because that helps with anxiety. It makes me feel calmer. I've changed things in my house, like the color schemes in my house, to be really calming and soothing. And I've been, I saw some things online about feng shui and how you can feng shui your house and how that can help. And I know Deb does things with crystals and she reads cards and like whatever it is, there's things that are going to move you forward. And so we got to keep looking for those. And Deb, now that I'm thinking about it, we should totally do an episode here about, crystals and healing and how you've used them and how they've helped you through your process. And we've had some good times when you've done some readings for me. So maybe we could do a reading live. That might be fun. But anyways, it's, I just want to encourage you to keep moving forward. I think that's the thing. I think that, honor your journey, honor what you're going through right now. It is a big deal. Do not minimize it. Honor it and give it the attention that it deserves. Don't try to push it down and just hope that it's going to go away, because it won't. But as you continue to define what healing is for you, as you continue to explore your healing, as you continue to put actions into place, it's going to be good and it's going to help you, and you're going to find things out about yourself that you didn't know existed, and you're going to become stronger and you'll become more confident and you'll know who you are in your heart of hearts, and you will know what the love of your son or your spouse or whoever it is that you're grieving, you know what that means, and you can hold it tight and you can hold it close, and that is yours and no one can take that from you. And that is powerful. So again, with all of these, I want to make sure that I'm offering you hope. I want to help, and I want to lead you on the path to finding a new and different type of happiness that you might not even still to this day know that exists. But I can promise you that it is there, and it is in this journey that I promise you that you will find it. So thank you all so much for watching. I know today is going to be a busy day for a lot of people. So take time for you, and remember to move yourself forward through grief today and every day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.